Hello and welcome to Commendable Commotion. I'm Matthew Tanamelji and I'll be talking to some fascinating people about some equally fascinating topics that need more commotion. They say never meet your heroes, but I was lucky enough to sit down with Eduardo Sanchez, co-director of a horror film that I and countless others admire, 1999's The Blair Witch Project. If you haven't seen Eduardo Sanchez and Dan Myrick's tale of three film students who travel deep into the Maryland woods to make a documentary about a spooky local legend, then I honestly don't know what to say to you. It's an amazing film, partly because it consists entirely of camera footage of the students' ill-fated journey into the woods. It fooled countless viewers into thinking it was real, partly thanks to a fascinating marketing campaign that included a website about the supposedly missing students. The film's success heralded the unprecedented rise of the found footage genre in the following years, with films such as Paranormal Activity, Wreck, and Cloverfield being prime examples. In this interview, I'll be talking to Eduardo about how he and his colleagues at Haxan Films got into making the Blair Witch Project, the film's release at the prestigious Sundance Film Festival, and Eduardo's reaction to the success the film received worldwide. However, Eduardo and I won't just be talking about the fictional 90s horror film, we'll also be talking about a very real and very disturbing crime that's been gaining considerable attention on the internet in recent months. This attention is partly due to a lost documentary that's now been found, called The Real Blair Witch. The documentary details an alleged kidnapping that took place in the town of Flint, Michigan in 2002, in which the entire incident was recorded on video. The crime has often been cited as having been inspired by the Blair Witch Project, and I'll be asking Eduardo Sanchez about his thoughts on the case, its potential links to his film's success, and the attention the crime has recently received online from people interested in the Blair Witch Project and true crime and lost media in general. If you're unfamiliar with the case, a link to a video detailing the incident is included in the description of this video. So, without further ado, here is my conversation with Blair Witch Project co-director Eduardo Sanchez. Well, sir, thank you very much. I'm quite overwhelmed that I'm talking to you, to be honest with you, because, Blair Witch Project and the other great work you've done, what can I say? It's just amazing. And all over the world, people are inspired by your films. And the rest of the crew at Haxan Films, your friends with whom you made Blair Witch Project back in the day. So I suppose on that note, Haxan Films, your colleagues, Gregg, Hale, Dan Myrick, who co-directed Blair Witch Project with you in the 90s. How did you get into filmmaking? You and your friends, how did you get into filmmaking and making things for, the public on television, film, etc.?
Yeah. Well, for me, I first of all, thanks for having me. For me, it started when I was, a little kid. I saw Star Wars, and it kind of, blew my brain up, and started really kind of, trying to. It gave me an interest in like how movies were made and special effects and music, and I started buying soundtrack albums, and I started watching more movies. And I was always a movie fan, but I had never really made the kind of the connection of like, okay, how do you make this? How do you make these movies? And I grew up, near Washington D.C., where there isn't much, of a film, um, a world here. There's no film, very little filmmaking going on, especially when I was growing up in the 70s. So I just kind of made up my own little world. I would do storyboards, and I would try to shoot little movies, and it never really worked. It was mostly like a hobby. So for me, it was mostly like just kind of fanboying on Star Wars and buying the toys, and then watching 2001: A Space Odyssey and Black Hole, and basically anything that had to do with science fiction. I would get into Battlestar Galactica, the TV show. And then and I kind of like, I always had this dream that it'd be cool to make movies, but again, like I grew up in a place that had no film production, so I couldn't really connect the dots. I was like, how does anybody even ever do this? And this was before Spike Lee and Kevin Smith and Robert Rodriguez and like these kind of early pioneers of like that, kind of blew up in independent cinema, like, oh, just get a camera and make your own movie. It was kind of before that. And so I kind of just, didn't really think too much of it. And then in high school, in like when I was about 16, I took a television production class just, for the sake of doing it. I thought it'd be interesting. And the first day there, the teacher just started talking about like, it's not just movie making. There's dozens of jobs and different positions, and everybody's an artist, but there's a bunch of different things that you can do. So you don't really have to be just a filmmaker. You can help. It's collaborative. There's lighting, there's sound, there's editing, there's post-production, there's all these things. And from that moment, I was like, I think I'm going to be a filmmaker. Like I finally connected the dots to a career, So I took that class, and I was always kind of ahead of everybody else, because I had just the most interest. I always found like some people that were as motivated as I was, and I always formed this little group. So we would do our films, and then we would do the things that we had to do for class, and then we would do our own things. We were always checking the camera out and just kind of pushing things and learning how to light and learning how to edit. And this was back in like 1985, 85. So I was really lucky that my school had equipment. Like most schools didn't have any kind of video equipment or any kind of video editing machines. So it was kind of just really serendipity that I went to a school that had that. And then after that, I went to college, to Montgomery College, and again, continued to kind of build this group around me, of kind of like-minded people that we wanted to make movies. We always kind of strived to do other things, and I did a feature on VHS in college in the late 80s, just to see if we could do it. I wrote it, I directed it, I edited it, and it's a silly little film, but it was quite crazy accomplishment that we got it done, and this group of friends and us, and me kind of made this feature film, which was kind of incredible. And then I went to film school, and that's where I met Dan and Gregg and Robin and Mike, who the 5 guys that formed Haxan Films. Dan and I were the first ones to hook up. We were in the same class, and Mike Manello and me and Dan Myrick. And Dan and I were always kind of pushing each other. We made a short film like in the second semester, and we kind of became friends, and we started coming up with ideas, and we came up with the idea for Blair Witch like around that first or second year of film school. And kind of just we were always like, man, that's a great idea, and one day we'll do it, and this and that. But we had other things to do. We had to graduate, and I was working on a feature film. He was working on a feature film. So we kind of went our separate ways. And then a few years later, we kind of came back together, and that's when we got Gregg Hale involved, and Mike Manello, and then Rob came in to try to raise a little bit of money. And we kind of just, the 5 of us just kind of formed Haxan Films. And and the rest is history. It was kind of just step by step. But I think everyone kind of played a part, in this, it kind of making it happen. And it just happened to be that we made a good team, to make that film.
Very good, very good. So it shows kind of like the importance of good working relationships between people, young or old, whatever stage of life they're in, college or after, before, whatever, during, really shows the importance.
Absolutely. I mean, I tell all the young filmmakers that kind of talk to me and ask for advice. I'm always like, you have to be competitive when you go to film school, or when you're in school. You want to be the best, and you want to make you want to strive to be the best. But remember that, it's highly collaborative, you know what I mean? Like, the filmmaking, you can't make movies by yourself. um so you make sure that you start building relationships, and you start looking for talent in other people, and be gracious enough to like know your shortcomings, and be able to like help somebody else and have them help you. I mean, I mean, I wouldn't have made Blair Witch if it wasn't, I wouldn't be talking to you right now if I hadn't met those people in film school. So it's very important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wise words indeed. And in terms of, when you were crafting kind of the mythology of the movie and the lore behind the movie, now I know maybe that may have been an aspect of it that maybe some other people in the crew may have got involved with a bit more than you, if I remember correctly, or maybe you were also equally involved. I can't remember. What was like, were there any inspirations for that? Like any folklore kind of things that really kind of made you think, wow, maybe we can, you know, sort of add
Um,
to it.
I mean, Dan and I were big fans of this show called In Search Of, which was, in the late 70s. Um, and that was like a big inspiration for Blair Witch. And there was always like that show was always about investigating something paranormal, and there's always some kind of mythology, that there was some kind of history. So then when we came up with the idea for Blair Witch, before it was even Blair Witch, we were like, okay, we need this documentary team goes out into the middle of nowhere and tries to find something. What are they trying to find? Like, what are they trying to investigate? So we knew that there was going to be some kind of legend involved. Um, and at first we kind of just said, we'll make it up later. And then once we got down to actually, making the film and trying to, in through pre-production, we came up with the name Blair Witch. And then the main inspiration, at least for me, was the Salem witch trials. It was like this idea of like, I think both Dan and I were like that, the fact that happened, that's, it's history. We were always thinking like, imagine, if something like that happened, in this town, and instead of a bunch of, women, it was just one woman, and there's the paranoia kind of, you know, uh, kind of made this happen, this tragedy where they basically sacrificed a woman because they thought that she was a witch, or was doing some kind of evil things to the kids or whatever of the village. And then so that was the beginning of the legend. And it's like, okay, well, they basically banished this woman, and eventually the kids started disappearing, and the townspeople started dying or whatever. And then, like, after the winter, somebody came to Blair, the township, and everybody was gone. There was nobody left in the township. So what happened to the people? So that was for us, that was a great mystery, kind of to begin the mythology. And then we came up with the idea that, like, every 50 years or so, something weird happened in that area. And then the Blair Witch Project, Heather's documentary happened, about 200 years later, I guess. Just kind of that was the main thing that happened in that time period. And then Ben Rock, who is one of our collaborators, had he was really kind of the expert on mythology, and he was really into that kind of stuff. So we kind of let him, and Gregg, I think, helped, and we all kind of helped a little bit, but they came up with kind of like the basic mythology, the basic things between the ending of between the Blair Witch, Ellie Kedward being banished into the woods, to the the documentary, which was, I guess, three things happened between that, the events. And then so we needed this because we needed Heather to have some kind of knowledge as far as like the mythology was concerned. Like, there was something that she needed to go out there to her film was about the Blair Witch, so we kind of made up this mythology to give to Heather so that she knew what she was doing, or at least she knew kind of what she was exploring. And it was very simple, like, it wasn't really detailed. There was just a basic incidents of what happened. And then later on, after we shot the movie, we got an opportunity to show our trailer, kind of like an 8-minute expanded trailer on a show called Split Screen, which was on Bravo. And this was like, 1998, we were still editing the film. And there was a lot of interest about, what is this Blair Witch? What the hell's going on? And we did our own website, and I was the only one that had any like kind of basic web building experience from a previous job. And also I was the only one without a girlfriend, without a partner. So I had a lot of disposable time, so I would edit the movie, and then I would work on the website. And then once we got the website up, we were like, okay, we need to flesh out the mythology, because that's, we want to do a timeline of what happened, what are the events of this Blair Witch mythology. And that's when we really went in, and like I filled in a lot of the details about, like we named the kids that Rustin Parr killed. Like we actually put names to them. We found these old photographs and kind of made, that we came up with the idea of like why Mike was standing in the corner. We came up with that whole thing of like that Rustin Parr put one person in the corner, why he killed the other one with the other kid, which was not explained when we shot the movie. We had no explanation for that. And we went in and, kind of filled in the gaps of the mythology. So yeah, at first I had very little to do with the mythology, other than just kind of, approving things and coming up with the initial story. But then afterwards, after we shot the movie, I took kind of the lead in kind of filling out the details, with always collaborating with everybody, but definitely like kind of took the lead of like building this mythology up for the website. So that's kind of the first kind of few levels of the mythology, how it grew. And then later on, once we sold the movie, there's books and comic books, and there was a dossier, there was like all these things that kind of kept adding to it. And even now, I think, people are still adding to it, which is kind of what I love about it, that it keeps growing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's almost become like a kind of part of history in and of itself, really, the whole kind of Blair Witch legend. I mean, it's fascinating. It really is, just hearing about it and how you crafted it and everything on the website. And what's also fascinating is Split Screen. John Pearson, is that right? Was he the guy
Yeah.
behind that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to find these days, but from what I've seen, it's just incredibly, it's an incredibly interesting show. Really kind of has that, mid to late 90s kind of feel, the whole independent filmmaking sort of climate that, existed. So, if you would, like, I mean, what was it like working with John Pearson and being on Split Screen? And, for those unfamiliar, would you be able to, briefly describe what Split Screen was?
Yeah, I mean, John Pearson is like this guy. He wrote this book called Mike, Spike, Slackers, and Dykes, which is about him. He lived in New York, and he, I think, was the programmer of some theater, and somehow got kind of involved with like a lot of of the early kind of indie filmmakers. So he helped like Kevin Smith and Spike Lee and Richard Linklater and Michael Moore, and so he he definitely, and a lot of others. He just kind of, he did different things for different people, but he was kind of involved with this early kind of indie thing. And because of that, he was known as like the independent film guru. So he would get people like I did a second feature at UCF in Orlando when I went to film school. While we were coming up with the idea for Blair Witch, I was working on a feature, and I sent him the feature. Like everybody would send him the feature, and he would kind of tell you, "Well, it sucked," or "I'll help you," whatever. So we knew that he was. We knew of him. We didn't know him personally, and then he made this show called Split Screen, which was on Bravo, which was like a half-hour show, and he would just basically do different things dealing with just it was kind of like a magazine show. Like he would go and interview people, and and it wasn't just about independent film, it was about the whole culture of independent film, and just really interesting kind of show. And he was doing an episode in Orlando. I don't even know. I think it was about gators or something. I'm not sure what the connection was, but he needed a cameraman, and Mike Manello, who is one of Haxan Films guys, was working at this place called the Enzian, which was like a theater that was like the local art house theater that really helped independent filmmaking, and was kind of like, everybody, it was kind of the hub. And I think it's still the kind of the hub for indie film in Orlando. And so Mike Manello was working there, and John came to the Enzian and said, we need a cameraman. We need, whatever, we're going to do we're doing this show. And Mike recommended Dan to be the cameraman. So, just so that, he knew who John Pearson was, and we knew we were making this movie, and it was just like an opportunity to like talk to John Pearson, So Dan, shot the segment for John, and pitched him a little bit of Blair Witch, like what he was doing. And John did, John, I mean, was getting pitched stuff all the time, so he wasn't really, I don't think he was paying attention much. But at the end of their journey, Dan gave him a VHS copy of our investor reel, which was basically pre-shooting anything. We did like a little investor reel that was like 7 or 8 minutes that basically laid down the mythology. Like, there's this mythology about the Blair Witch in Maryland, and these 3 film students, and we the names were like Mike and Joe and Jane, like just basically something, just very generic names, and we just put random people's photos of the filmmakers, so everything was just very generic. And we told him, we explained, like, now Haxan Films has found this footage, and we've been hired by the families to make a documentary about the footage, and it's the kids disappeared, just kind of all the facts of these 3 filmmakers disappearing and their footage being found a year later and all that stuff. And so Dan gave him that video, and then I don't know, a week later or a few days later or something, John calls Dan up and says, holy crap, man, I lived in Maryland, I never heard of this, like, what's going on? And Mike and Dan was like, well, it's all bullshit. We're making this movie. And John was like, oh my God, I love it. And we went to visit. That was a big moment for us. Like, we went up to his house up in upper New York State, and in the Hudson Valley, and we had lunch with him, and that's the first time I think I had met him. And he was like, I love it, and we were like, well, do you want to put some money into it? We didn't know exactly how he could help us. We just knew he could help us. And he was like, I'm not gonna invest any money in, but what I will do is I want to air your investor reel as like the season finale of the show. And then, if you guys are gonna, because we were like, we're gonna start shooting this, and we're gonna shoot it in October. This is like summer of '97. And he said, well, we'll air the show, and then I'll give you some money for that, and then I'll give you another lump of money for the show, for this, for the next season. I'll open the season with the Blair Witch, the real footage. Finally we can see the real footage and stuff. So he basically bought 2 segments for us, and I think paid us like $10,000, like $5,000 for each of the segments. And that was the main money we used to make the Blair Witch Project. We were all trying to raise money. I know Rob Cowie had come in to like try to raise money, but we weren't being very successful with raising money. We were mostly like just putting stuff on our credit cards, and Gregg had put in some money. So this was a big boost for us, and it allowed us, we were kind of disappointed because we were like, we wanted him to invest, and we wanted him to be, a producer or whatever, but he really did us a huge favor by giving us this money. So we took the money, and he showed the segment on split screen, at the end of the season. And then we went off and shot the movie in October. And then the first thing we edited was another 7 or 8 minute segment with the actual footage. and interviews with us, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was, and I remember I went and delivered the edit to John in New York, and he loved it. He was like, oh my God, this is great. So that's what aired on the season premiere of Split Screen, which was like March or April of 1998. And then once it aired, his website blew up, with just like, back then there was, the internet was very limited. It was basically, his website was like a list of the episodes and then some graphics and then a discussion board where you could like talk to, just basically threads. And it became like the Blair Witch discussion board all of a sudden. Like everybody wanted to talk about Blair Witch and this and that. And John was like, look, why don't you guys do your own website, because you guys are killing us. There's no room for any of the other segments. So we led people over. I did a website with a little discussion board, and kind of funneled all the traffic to our, to blairwitch.com. We made this website, and people just started, coming from all over the world to this website. It was, again, it was very limited in today's standards, but like by the time we went to, I did this newsletter, which was called Haxan News, and I wrote every week or so, I would just write about what was happening and how the edit was going and what we were shooting, and because we were still shooting some stuff. And by the time we got to Sundance, we had like 10,000 people on our mailing list, which, doesn't sound like anything nowadays, but back then, for a website that was completely not promoted at all. I mean, we spent no money on marketing. It was, pretty remarkable. And we were getting an audience from all over the world, so it was, and especially for me, like the website was really inspiring because we were going through some financial hardships. Like we were just basically working on the movie, and we had no money, and it was, again, like I said, I didn't have a girlfriend at the time. It was a very lonely time for me, and I put a lot of effort into, I just put all my waking hours basically into the movie and then the website. And I really loved interacting with the fans, and coming up with new sections for the website. Like I did this thing called I started putting up Heather's journal, because Heather started doing a journal while she was shooting the film. We gave her a journal. And so I started putting page by page the journal up. And every time I would put a page, I would like hide it somewhere on the site. And there was this thing called hidden links, and people loved like looking for the page. And and then people would find it, and I would put it somewhere else. And it was really cool. I mean, a lot of fan interaction, and it really inspired me, because I was like, man, these people have never even seen the film yet, and we're getting like interest from all over the world. So for us, and especially for me, because I was kind of day to day, me and Mike were like the main guys that worked on the website. It was just really inspiring, and it really kind of helped us through some dark and financially troubling times. So I'm really grateful for the fan interaction, and I still am really grateful for like all the the fans of the movie, and they've definitely we owe them a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an amazing story about how, like, it was able to kind of, gave you something to do during a time of both personal and financial hardship. So that's a lovely story to hear, I must say. And then, of course, it took the world by storm when the film was released.
Yeah.
I remember hearing an interview with you. You said, like, obviously, you grew up watching Star Wars, and there's your film, the trailer playing beside the trailer for one of the Star Wars movies and all these other massive things. So, like, I mean, I'd say it was a bit overwhelming, was it? Like when it really just kind of like, took the world by storm, the Blair Witch Project in 99. Was it kind of overwhelming for you?
It was. I mean, it was, because I mean, like the people that that we kind of modeled ourselves after were like, Kevin Smith and Robert Rodriguez and Spike Lee, and these filmmakers that had like gone to, some of them had gone to Sundance, and the movie had come out and it made, a couple $1 million, and it was in the theaters. I mean, it was just crazy for us. I was like, oh my God, a movie that we made, by hand, or they made, by hand for, $20,000-$30,000 or whatever it was, is now in the theaters. It was just crazy. So that was, we were always like, kind of, that was kind of the goal. But so when Blair Witch came out, and like, they were expecting it to make maybe $10 million at the most. I mean, that was like pie in the sky. Because I remember, we had done some research before we went to Sundance about who we wanted to release the movie, and on the top of our list was this company called Artisan, and they had released a movie called Pi, Darren Aronofsky's new first film. And I mean, I love Pi, but it was like it's not a very commercial film, black and white, and about math, and an interesting film, but not a commercial kind of movie. And they still like made $2 or $3 million with that movie, so we were like, this is an interesting company, because we knew that our movie was going to be was a little freaking movie. We shot on video, and so we were like, man, if they could do that with Pi, they could probably do something with Blair Witch. They could do something similar with Blair Witch. So once Artisan bought the movie, we were like, wow, I think we're going to be in good shape. I think we're going to make some money, a couple $1 million and this and that. And then, the first weekend it did, it was limited release, and it did like $65,000 or something per screen average. And then the first weekend of wide release, it did like almost $30 million. And then the next week it did almost $30 million. And it was just like, no one had ever seen anything like that, including ourselves. We were just like, what the hell is happening? And then on top of that, we were on the cover of magazines, and, we were in, Dan and I were, on TV shows, and the actors were on the Tonight Show, and, David Letterman, and, we were on the Jon Stewart Show, and Good Morning America, like these huge shows here. And then we went to the UK, and we went to Japan and Australia, and, all these, and it was just, this crazy worldwide thing. And it was overwhelming. It was just kind of like we had no idea how to handle it, and if it wasn't, like, I think that if it had just been me, or if it had just been Dan by themselves, like if it wasn't a group, I think, we would have gone crazy. We would have lost ourselves, because the fact that it was all 5 of us, and we would kind of like, bust each other's balls still, and kind of like, not let anybody get too high on themselves, I think that helped a lot. But still, it was just a crazy time for us, and eventually it led to most of us going our separate ways. After a few years, it was just too much success too quickly, and we didn't know what to do. We were completely inexperienced as far as like, what now? Like, we had no idea what to do, and we didn't have, unfortunately, we had some people around us that were supposed to guide us, and they didn't really guide us in the proper way. And we had agents that were trying to push us to do certain things, and and honestly, like for me, we were just scared. I was just scared to because you go from making movies for your friends that only your friends and your family see, and now you're like, okay, now this movie's been all over the world, and my next movie is going to be all over the world. Like, now that pressure was just overwhelming, and it's still like, I still deal with that now, even as as a much older person and a much older filmmaker, much more experienced. I still have a lot of stress, and that's why part of the big reason why I haven't made a feature film in like 10 years is that there's just a different level of stress, and that comes with making a movie nowadays, that I still haven't really learned how to handle it. I mean, I'm much better than I was, but it's still a really, really stressful situation for me. And I think for all of us, we had no idea what we were doing. We were getting, we were getting offers to do TV shows, and we didn't really want to do TV and this and that. And so it was, we were learning a lot and also just making a ton of mistakes. And but it was completely overwhelming, and it was really scary.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It sounds definitely quite complex, but I suppose as well, like, what I always think when I read about the making of the Blair Witch Project and when I've listened to other interviews with yourself and from talking to you right now, there is a sense that, at the end of the day, it was a group of people from film school, common interests, like-minded people, and had the ability to blend well together and work well with each other to make a very successful film, regardless of eventually going their separate ways, etc. It's really just an amazing story. I always think about how Haxan films went from like studying film, as many people do, and then using all that and growing from there to make this smash hit. Basically, I just think it's a very inspirational story. So yeah, I know what you mean, but as you said, a bit scary as well when it came down to
Yeah.
it. When the
Yeah. Because you kind of, again, like now you're a professional, and everybody says, once you start making money, whatever, in your dream, things change. You're a businessman, and now you're answering to other people, and we, at least I was not ready for that transition. I was really immature and scared, mostly scared, and unfortunately it led to um just I mean, we're all still friends, but we're definitely not as close as we used to be. And it and I think also, um Dan and I were kind of the main guys. We wrote it, and we directed it, and we edited it together, and uh so people were always comparing us to each other. I remember one time we were with our agents, and one of the agents said, I still haven't figured out which one is the talented one, which one is really the talented one. It's just stuff that you're like, why would you say that to us? And I think that there was just a lot of pressure between us, and I think it led to our relationship changing. And I still talk to Dan. We're still friends, but it just isn't the same. And it would be nice to collaborate with him again, but I just don't know how that could happen, ever again. So it was sad, but it was just something that happens, unfortunately, to a lot of people once they, money becomes an issue, and just this kind of crazy wave of success all of a sudden hits you.
yeah, I know what you mean. So I'm getting the sense that, like, definitely you'd agree with more going into filmmaking for, true, passionate, creative reasons rather than, oh, because it'll make some money. Yeah, it's probably a good bit of advice there, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's and it's good to hear, obviously, that you and the crew are still friends, definitely, because it sounds like it was a difficult time, certainly. So, but it is good to hear that you're all still friends. And in terms of then Blair Witch 2, I mean, so were you involved in that sequel in 2000 with were you and Dan Myrick involved at all in that sequel?
We were all involved. It basically, um right right around the fall of 99, before, right around the time the movie was going to go to video, the artisan was like, we want to make another movie, we want to release it next October. And this was a really big surprise to us, because we knew there was probably, once the movie was made, it had already made a bunch of money in the film, in the theaters, and it was about to come out on video. And you know we were enthusiastic. We wanted to make another movie, but we didn't want to do that right away. We felt that this was 99, so it was before Saw. Remember Saw came out, and Saw like would come out with a movie every year. Like that was the first, I think that was the first franchise that would come out with a, because usually even successful franchises wait at least 2 years between sequels. And this was before, so Saw came out and kind of changed that, where yeah, we can come out with a new movie every year and people will come to it. So the idea of making another movie a year later was just absurd to us. And also and it's something that's still kind of Blair Witch is a very polarizing movie. It still is. So there was a bunch of people that loved the movie, but there was a lot of people that hated the movie. Like they just thought it was just a piece of crap. And there was a lot of, right at the end of the theatrical run, there was a lot of backlash, people kind of talking crap about it and this and that. And the movie had just become too big for, for what it was. And so we were fully aware of that, and we were like, we told him that we're like, we should probably lay low for at least a year, plan the movie, like really write it and take our time with it. And then, let's come out in 2 years or a year and a half, like, let's just give us some time. But Artisan was like, no, we want to do another movie. And, what do you guys want to do? And we were like, well, we want to do a prequel. We want to do a movie that takes place in the 1700s. And, it's about Hale Kedward. And they were like, I don't know if we want to do that. They want to do something quick. So they eventually, we eventually said, well, we're not interested in another sequel, at least us. So they went out and saw, and hired some writers and, had some scripts written, and nobody was really happy with any of the scripts. And then they came back to us and said, okay, we'll do the prequel with you. We'll let you do whatever you want, but we have to release it next year. And this was by this time, this was November. So we had 11 months. We hadn't written the script. We had a basic storyline. We hadn't, done any kind of research as far as like, where we're going to shoot it. The movie takes place in the winter. So we were going to have to go somewhere, somewhere cold, and we were going to have to shoot it before the spring if we were going to stay in North America. And it was just, we were just like, we're not going to make a good movie. We're not going to make a good movie with this kind of schedule. So we told them no. And they, that's when Joe Berlinger got involved. And we really loved Joe, him and Bruce, I forget his last name, but, they did these movies together, these documentaries, and we loved them. I mean, we thought they were really great documentary filmmakers. And we were like, Joe's obviously a talented guy. Maybe he can do something cool, and maybe it's going to be kind of semi-documentary, feeling like we were really interested in what he had to say. But we didn't really, once, we got the script, we didn't really, dig the script either. We're like, I don't know about this, but, we couldn't do anything about it. So they paid us, a bunch of money, and we were executive producers, and we, basically just stayed away from it as much as possible. Just let them do their thing. And then eventually started getting the footage, and we were looking at the footage and going, yeah, I don't know about this. I don't know how it's going to work, And then they finally showed us the movie, and we were like, I mean, I feel bad because we were just really arrogant and kind of full of ourselves, but we did not like the movie, I'm saying, and we were very verbal about it, and it really wasn't, like looking back on it, it's not that I really hated the movie. It was just that the movie felt like a distant cousin of Blair Witch, of our movie, you know what I mean? And we didn't understand the whole idea of like making a movie that treats the first movie as a movie instead of part of the mythology, like it's like starting Jaws 2 and saying, man, Jaws really made a lot of money in the theater, didn't it? Now let's do Jaws 2. It just didn't make any sense to us, you know what I mean? And So, and it wasn't the movie that we wanted to make. We thought, prequel would have been better, would have been more surprising, and and the prequel was kind of like The Witch is really like the thing that's most close to what we were thinking, even though it's very different, but that's kind of the same kind of vibe that we were looking for, same kind of time period. And so the movie, they were like, well, you have to do interviews for the movie. And then we're like, well, what are we going to say? What are we going to say? Do interviews? Like, I can't, I'm not going to lie to people. So it was just a really difficult time for us. And then the movie came out and they screwed Joe also. They added a bunch of stuff to the movie. They took the movie away from him. Um, it was just a really crazy, and the movie actually made some money. I mean, it wasn't like, it was a very low budget movie and it made like, 30-40 million dollars. I'm not sure how much it made, but it wasn't the success they wanted. And, it kind of killed the franchise, unfortunately, until, 2016. But it was, it was a crazy time for us because again, we were trying to make our own movie. We were trying to make a comedy called Heart of Love, which was another big, crazy thing that happened. That's a whole different story. Um, and it was just a shame because like if they would have been a little patient, we would have made another Blair Witch movie, and at least it would have been from the same people. And I think at least, I don't know if it would have been any good. And I don't know if Dan and I would have killed each other. All of us would have killed each other. All of five of us would have, gotten in a fight during it. I think we would have. But it is what it is, and we made the best of it. And again, like I don't hate the movie. I just feel it was just a cash grab. Like they were looking to further the company, on the back of Blair Witch. And it was unfortunate. And, we made a bunch of mistakes and they made mistakes. And I think Joe was very kind of, bitter about, what happened to him. And, they took the movie and he's got a right to be angry, so it was just a disaster, basically, from beginning to end.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. No, I see what you mean. Yeah. Well, sometimes you do hear about these things happening in the world of cinema as such. But yeah, I know what you mean. It sounds difficult. I'm sorry to hear that. Really, I am. And on an even more serious note, there was a thing. Let's say, when was it again? Early 2000s, couple of years after Blair Witch 2 came out. A story that sort of has semi-exploded on the internet, as I was saying to you earlier, in the last couple months or so. An incident in the town of Flint in Michigan that sort of now is kind of called like, the Real Blair Witch incident. I know you're sort of aware of it when we were talking earlier, but it's a really polarizing case, where basically there was, sort of allegations of a kidnapping and then a court case. And, obviously the victim who was not in it, and then a lot of sort of polarization with a lot of people saying, yeah, she was. And then the accused, some of them, were, as in court. And there were some sentences given in the end, and it just is a very sort of murky and sad story. It's really awful. So, were you aware of that incident when it happened? Did you hear about it in the news or anything?
I mean, honestly, I was not aware of it until you sent me that video of it. And it was, I couldn't believe that I hadn't heard of it. But and I don't know if it's, if it was back when it happened, they called it Blair Witch thing, or maybe now they've kind of connected it to Blair Witch. But I had never heard of it. I mean, it was, Blair Witch was, a movie that was shot on video, that was basically used no lighting and no known actors and no music. I mean, it was a very easy movie to like copy. and especially movie to spoof. Like there was a lot of Blair Witch spoofs after people would send us. We had stacks of videotapes of people sending us, their spoofs. Um, and some of these spoofs like were even had like distribution deals, like it was just crazy. And Blair Witch was being spoofed everywhere. So it's not surprising that, and honestly, that's, it's what I'm most proud of is when filmmakers come up to me now and or people that just work in the business. And I do a lot of television, and like people, always come up to, there's always somebody, oh man, I watched Blair Witch, really inspired me, made, maybe get into the business. And the big thing is that, it basically proved that, you have a good idea and you have some good execution and you have a lot of luck, you can kind of, make your you can make a big splash you can still make a big splash in this world, like, in the cinematic world, just like we had been inspired by, again, Robert Rodriguez and Kevin Smith and Spike Lee, the fact that we were inspiring other people. It's the thing I'm most proud of, like I never thought any of my films would, inspire people like Star Wars inspired me, Um, so I'm not surprised that somebody, there were so many copycats of Blair Witch, and there were so many found footage movies after Blair Witch. It's not surprising that somebody took it to the limit, took it to the, the knucklehead decision of like, hey, let's really kidnap somebody and pretend that, we really kidnapped somebody and we're going to kill them, and not tell the actress that, or the person that we're kidnapping, that it's all for a movie. I mean, it's incredibly stupid. You know what I mean? But it's not surprising, and obviously, like, I don't know much about the case, like you said, there was very polarizing. This girl was supposedly kidnapped, and there's, she claimed that she didn't know, and then there's people that claim that she did know, that she could have escaped at any minute, and and I don't know anything, I don't know whatever, but just the idea that like somebody took my movie or took our movie and inspired them to like do something stupid. I mean, it's just, I feel really bad about it. I mean, it's terrible. But it's an unfortunate incident. And when us filmmakers and artists in general, when we put things out in the world, especially negative things out in the world, there is a certain sense of responsibility, that you put this out there in the world, and now somebody is using it to, to inspire somebody to do something. It's the, age old, like Charles Manson with the Beatles, like, there's a lot of cases where like, life imitates art, and, some crazy, or some person that's not, balanced properly, gets the the same with video games. People are like, oh, people are more violent because of video games or whatever. The science is still kind of out on that, but I mean, especially me, but me as a filmmaker, I mean, yeah, I feel partly responsible for putting things out there, and then there are some things that I have like come up with in the dark recesses of my mind that I've like said, no, I can't, I'm not going to put that out into the world. That just doesn't, it's not going to do anybody any good. And if somebody does something like that, I would feel really, bad and kind of responsible for it. But it's just, like we took, the way we made Blair Witch was, a very much of an unconventional way of, we basically took 3 actors and, tortured them and kept them, didn't feed them, and, made them sleep in in tents for a week and not bathe. And, we scared them at night and woke them up at night and made them walk all over the place. And, we put them through all this hardship, but, it was all pre-planned. It was all, are you sure you want to do this? Yes, we'll do this, I couldn't imagine even thinking of like doing something to somebody like that without like, consent. That's where they screwed up. I mean, like you can't, you know, I mean, a practical joke is a different thing, like, there's those practical joke shows, practical joke shows where like something weird, Jackass, or, some of those movies, they do something weird and whatever. But I mean, the idea of like, putting somebody and, telling someone that you're going to kill them, not telling them that it's a joke, that it's a part of a movie or something. It's just, you that's not very smart.
Exactly.
So, so it's just, it's unfortunate that it happened, and hopefully people, learn their lessons. And luckily nobody, got, hurt, other than emotionally hurt. Um, and again, I don't know which way to, turn, did the woman know? Did she not know? Whatever it is, but it's still, it's a sad case. And luckily nobody got killed, and nobody got, physically injured, I don't think. So at least it didn't turn completely tragic, but it's kind of it's not a good thing,
Yeah, exactly. Now you mentioned feeling kind of partly responsible for it. I mean, personally, like, this is just me, but I mean, it is sort of said that like, it can be said about any film or any TV series or any book. Oh, such and such a thing inspired this or that to happen. When in actuality, at the end of the day, it's about, people's responsibility and, mental well-being, looking after their own mental well-being, that sort of thing. And I'm just talking generally. I'm not talking about this specific case, but I mean just generally, like say with how the media was. Some people were kind of saying, oh, Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange is to blame for this or that copycat crime, when in actuality, it's about the individuals doing the copycat crimes. So personally, I'd say responsibility is not on you and your crew at all. But I understand it's very sad reading about these kinds of things. So
Yeah, absolutely. And and I think that, I mean, obviously, nobody forced these people to do what they did, and the same thing, with the Clockwork Orange and all the other kind of copycat things that happen. Like nobody forced these people to do, to go on a crime spree or whatever it was that the movie portrayed. But I mean, for me as a human being, like, it does feel a little weird if my movie put some stupid idea in their head. um do I feel responsible? No, but I feel bad that my movie was part of, of getting them there. You know what I mean? um if it wasn't my movie, maybe something else would have probably done, the same, motivated them to do something stupid. It's just, again, luckily nobody got, seriously hurt. But there's just, people are very flawed, and there's just, people make mistakes all the time, and sometimes you think it's what is a great idea ends up being just the worst idea, and ruining your life. So it's just the way it is. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we have our own, there's a sense of, responsibility, um that we have to carry on our own. We're responsible for our actions, no matter what inspires you or whatever. You're still responsible for, doing something illegal if you do it.
yeah, exactly. And in terms of lost media, I know that the documentary that was made about that incident back in the day was called The Real Blair Witch, which was the name of it. So it's an interesting title. It's sort of debatable about whether Blair Witch Project even did inspire them. I know maybe there's one or two news articles that there were one or two news articles that sort of did seem to say that it did, but again, maybe it's a bit debatable. So, who knows, kind of a thing. But in terms of lost media, um, what do you think kind of draws people to lost media? Because that documentary was essentially lost, as far as many people knew anyway, and then it's only recently it's been put up on YouTube. So it became a sort of very intriguing case of lost media. Here's this kind of creepy, sad kind of documentary. I remember seeing it. Does anyone know what happened to it? So, what do you think, like, in your opinion, like, as someone who tells stories, a filmmaker and television director, what draws people to, lost media and tracking things like that down? Because, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you know, there's, humans are curious, humans are curious, animals. And regardless of what your intentions are, I know that there's a lot of people go back and, look over people's tweets and Facebook posts and stuff that, online stuff that you've posted, 10, 15 years ago. And oh my God, look what he said, 15 years ago. I mean, there's that, that kind of cancel culture kind of got you. Journalism, unfortunately, is just, it's around, and the problem is that, the internet gives you the tools to go back and look at, these things. And I think now, people, whether it's you want to catch somebody in something bad that they did in the past, or that they said, or you're just curious and you're just kind of searching. I think the internet is just this big, mountain of information. And things do sometimes get lost in this, in that big, volume of digital media. And people just are something bored or whatever, and they look around, they find this old post, and or are doing research, like you were doing research for this interview about Blair Witch, and you find this, wait, what is this? And I just think that it's a sign of the times. I mean, back in the day, to do this kind of research, you'd have to go to a library, and you have to, if they didn't have it, you had to find where this book was, or where this article was, or this newspaper article or magazine, or something that had aired on television, and you were hoping that somebody had videotaped it. Now, like, everything we do online is recorded, and it's kept, it seems to be kept somewhere. It's always, they say now everything you post is going to be there forever. So it's why I have a Twitter, but I don't really tweet any of my opinions, or because, first of all, I don't think anybody gives a shit, and secondly, I just see what it is. Like, it can just get you into trouble. It's just, people are looking to there's malicious people out there who are just looking to be, assholes and trolls. And unfortunately, that's part of the, internet. Is just, and especially social media, is just people, giving out their opinions on things that they shouldn't be, So again, it's, I think it's part of human nature to be curious and to go look. And I think it's fun to kind of search for things and, research. I think some people love to do research and find new things. Then you find these little things and you're like, hey, man, look at this. We found, this news story. And I think that, I think it can be, I mean, like, I don't have any offense, take any offense to like this thing kind of surfacing again. Obviously, I'm sure the people involved feel differently. But it's just the nature of the world right now. The internet has like changed humanity. And I think it's, it's shown the the positive things. There's a lot of positive things that are happening with, social media and being, connected. But then there's a lot of negative things happening too. It's human nature. There's just bad things and good things in all of us. And unfortunately, sometimes, things that happened in the past maybe should stay in the past. And I'm not saying that this should have stayed in the past. It's like, for me, it's like, I was interested when you sent it to me. I had never heard of it. So it was very enlightening to me, and very interesting, again, in a kind of a weird way, because to a certain extent, I feel, a little bit responsible for at least putting that idea out there. I mean? At least motivating somebody, if my film motivated. But I mean, I think for the most part, my film has motivated people in a much more positive, effect than negative effect. You know what I'm saying? So, I'm still proud of it. And unfortunately, things like this happen. But I do feel that, like, right now, it's you can get lost in the internet. I mean, you can get lost in the vast ocean that is the internet. And there are some things out there that, are better left, uncovered. And then there are other things that should be uncovered, So, just the nature of where we are in history.
Yeah, it's a good point actually. Yeah, yeah, definitely. And found footage as such, in the early 2000s, speaking of finding things, etc. I guess it's fair to say, and other people have said this as well, maybe you'd agree that like, in early 2000s, maybe around 2002, 2003, when people saw the footage that was kind of taken of that incident that the people took, that was in the documentary, The Real Blair Witch,
Mhm.
of the alleged kidnapping incident. So would you think it's fair to say that found footage, would be more kind of shocking in those days because things like YouTube were not available in beginning of the 2000s, all that kind of thing, and so the fear basically induced by something like the what was called Real Blair Witch incident maybe would have been stronger. Or I mean, obviously the fear induced in people from seeing that kind of thing now is still strong, understandably. But it's interesting how found footage kind of evolves both in fictional contexts and non-fictional contexts. Maybe you'd
Yeah.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I think that it was, everything's on video now, how many millions of videos are uploaded to YouTube every day. Um, and you're right. Back then, before YouTube, before Facebook, before Twitter, like there was, you had to kind of search for things, and there wasn't this big pipeline of, you couldn't get on TikTok or Instagram and just see shit, pop up. You actually had to go and look for it. So I think that it did lend itself to, there just weren't as many things out there. So like whenever anything kind of broke through, it made a bigger splash than it does now. It's like, that, I think part of the reason why Blair Witch worked is that, nobody had ever seen anything like this put together in that way and marketed in that way. And it made a huge splash because there was no competition at the time. There was nothing else like it. Obviously now, if you do the same thing, it wouldn't even be a blip on most radars. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. Back then, people, especially younger people, like don't have a hard time realizing like what life, what it was, even the internet was before YouTube and Facebook, when it was AOL and CompuServe, and it was very, very limited. Like you had to kind these websites, and you had to go look for them. There's Yahoo was the main search engine, and it was just a different world. It was a little harder to, it was much harder to find things, and so yeah, it just but just sheer lack of material made anything that kind of was special even more special. There was just not as much competition for eyeballs as there is now.
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. That's a good point as well. And so, I suppose given your amazing career and the amazing careers of your friends and colleagues as well, like, what would you say to people who want to become filmmakers or want to become television makers or, television directors and anything in between? Um, what would you say to people who would want to go into that career?
um it depends on, I mean, there's a lot of kind of different uh aspects of entertainment. I mean, first and foremost, um it's a really tough place, like, it's really hard to have a long career in film and television. Like I feel really blessed that I was able to make the transition from indie film to television. Um, but that's not always the case with most people. most people never, get the chance to make their own film or even write their own film or direct their own film. It's highly competitive. It's very cutthroat. There is, you're only as good as as the last thing you did, and it's very mercenary. Like there's very much, um, you know, people don't do you a lot of favors in this business. You know what I mean? Um, but that's just the way it is, I mean, unfortunately, that's just the way it is. So if you're gonna go into it, you really got to love it. You really got to love it, and you have to, you know um you have to realize that there's the culture of filmmaking is, um it's all encompassing. Like I work in television, and films are the same way, but I work in television, and the people that I'm working with are working at least 12-hour days, 5 days a week. And that's, if you're lucky, it's 12 hours. A lot of times, it stretches to 13, 14, 16 hours, 18-hour days. It's so you really got to love it, and it's, it's the toughest. And I always, and the more I do it, the more I, not feel sorry for people, because obviously, people are responsible for their own actions and their own careers. And actually, the reason I feel bad is that most of the people that I meet on set are just such great people. Like they really are, they really love what they're doing, and they have this crazy energy. And that's my favorite part of television directing, is the crews, and like, the energy I get from these people. And I love to like give them energy when they need it. Like it's just a great, I love that part of it. But at the same time, you feel, the industry abuses their workers. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. We get paid really well, most of the time. But it's a really abusive industry. I don't think people realize that, like, you know like being a driver in the film business means that you're starting out hours before anybody else, and you're there later than anybody, hours after everybody leaves, and you have to go home, try to get some sleep, and then be back, sometimes in less than 8 hours. So it's brutal. And what I always want, I'm always amazed at, is that people still love it. Like I have on my last job in New York, my driver, this guy named Tony, was just like the most delightful guy, and I loved talking to him. We became friends, and this guy would get routinely 4, maybe 5 hours of sleep at the most, every night. And he'd have to come in early to the city to beat the traffic, and it's just, and he was I'm lucky to do this, and he loved it. And again, you meet people on set, that are just working, and it eats up into your private life. You spend way more time at work than you do with any of your loved ones. It's hard on families, it's hard on kids. It's you really do have to kind of sacrifice a huge chunk of your personal life to be in the film business. So you have to love it. You have to be a special kind of person to do that. And me, like I do these shows, and it's usually 3 or 4 weeks, and it's hard work. It's especially when you're shooting, and you got to be up early, and you got to be ready for the next day, and you don't have even weekends. You're just basically sleeping most of the time, just recovering, and then you have to do homework for the next week. It's exhausting. But when I finish, I go home, and I can at least go home, and usually it's a few weeks before I have another job. These people start the very next day with another director and another episode. So these people are my heroes. Like I find they're, who they are. Like I just find that, like, they're heroic to me. The fact that they can keep going and keep loving it, and that they're not all like bitter and just angry, like I would, I mean, you do run into that, but most of the time people are like just the nicest people, and they love what they're doing, and they, they do hate the hours, but they do love what they're doing. And I think hopefully, so that's what I tell people is like, make sure that you know what you're getting into, because it's not for everybody. This life is not for everybody. And most of the jobs in the business are like that. Like obviously you can get lucky and become, Quentin Tarantino, or a big director that can work as whenever they want. But even that, like people, like big time directors and big time writers, they are working all the time. Most of them, most of the people that I know that are really successful are just working all the time. So it takes over your life. So just, be prepared for that. And then another big thing is just be cool. Like this industry is really hard. I know that, we hear stories of people being, egomaniacs and yelling at crew and this and that. And it's like, that's like the most unprofessional thing you can do. Like just, you get so much more, satisfaction, you get much better work if you just are cool, and you get hired more if you're cool. Like that's one of my main things I tell people. It's just like, be cool. Like don't learn to be a good manager, learn to work with others. It's highly collaborative. Like I still don't understand why when people have attitudes and stuff, it's just like, there's just no need for that. So I don't want to discourage anybody, because, and I think people, if they love it enough, will get into it. But it's a tough business, and most of the people that I went to film school with, are not in the business anymore. They just, for one reason or the other, they just ended up doing something else. And again, like, I'm one of the only people I know in my circle of friends that directs television, that's lucky enough to have work in television. So it's just, and my kids, two of my kids, are, they're in college, and they're, wanting to get into the business in one way or the other. And I'm just always telling them how hard it is, how this is not an easy business ever, and so you just got to be prepared for that. And there's a lot easier ways to make a living. I'll tell you that there's a lot less stressful ways of making a living. So if it's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
I know what you mean, yeah, but very good advice anyway, regardless, absolutely. So, but yeah, I know what you mean. It sounds like a tough industry, but very wise words indeed. On that note, what have you been working on recently, and what can people look forward to in your television directing work and, your other work in general?
Like I said before, I haven't done a feature in like 10 years. And there are, now that I'm a television director, like there is some interest in like, doing features now. Again, and I love features. Like that's really what I kind of got into. But again, it's a really tough thing to do. It's like not only physically, but emotionally. Like for me, it's like, I don't know, it's a tough thing. It's just a emotionally draining thing. And it's really, for me, like it kind of affects me in a very weird way. But I'm, happily doing television. I just did an episode of FBI, and I'm going to go to Hungary next at the end of the month to do FBI International. I've been lucky enough to continue to get work in the television world. I did an episode of Star Trek last year. I did an episode of Fantasy Island. That's the Star Trek episode will air this year. The Fantasy Island will air this year. I did a show for Amazon called The Horror of Dolores Roach, that I did with Blumhouse, and cool show. I'm not sure when it's coming out, but it should be coming out soon. And I just feel, just really blessed to, be working, and again, meeting new people and learning, and Blair Witch was kind of my entryway into all this. And almost 25 years later, still at it. And I feel, again, very fortunate and very blessed to have been a part of that movie, and just continue to do that. And my partner, Gregg, Hale, and I, who was one of the producers on Blair Witch, we are currently in different stages of developing TV, our own TV shows and our own multimedia projects. So, and again, I think this year I'm probably going to end up making a feature, whether I like it or not. But for now, I'm kind of very happy and content in the TV world. And if you guys, whoever wants to see, I got an episode of CSI Las Vegas coming out, FBI, Fantasy Island, and then Star Trek, and then the Horrors of Dolores Roach. So there's a lot of stuff coming out this year that I did last year, and hopefully, I'll keep working this year and keep plugging away at it.
Very good, very good. That's super interesting. And if you do end up making a feature film, best of luck with it. It's been 10 years, I think you said, since your last one. So yeah, absolutely.
No, thanks. No, thank you. I mean, there's always this desire, like I just, when you go see a good movie, you're like, oh man, that's, definitely motivates you. But then you start thinking of like, man, making a film it's a lot of work. And it's just a different kind of work. And honestly, I've gotten a little used to, I've gotten used to just working, 3-4 weeks at a time. So it's going to be a big, it'll be a big challenge for me, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, thank you, man. I mean, it's always, part of my desire is to, at least make a few more features before I'm done here. So we'll see what happens.
Very good, very good. You may not be comfortable sharing this yet if it's, very early planning stages in your mind even, but any idea in particular that you'd be interested in exploring in this possible soon-to-be film?
No, I can't really say anything about it because there's a bunch of different things that are kind of percolating, but it's definitely horror. All the stuff I'm developing is horror. There's one movie that's autobiographical, which is not horror, that my partner Gregg just finished the first draft on, and it takes place in Afghanistan. And it would be our first kind of movie based on real events and not horror, but it's a horrific story, but it's not horror. And that would be, I mean, I really look forward to doing that. I really look, if hopefully it happens, knock on wood. But trying to expand, out of horror, or at least do different things in horror. But still, I love horror, and but that's kind of where, again, we're still kind of concentrating in the horror and thriller world, and glad to be continuing to work in it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, we'll keep our eyes peeled, definitely, and I definitely will as well. So thank you very much indeed, Mr. Sanchez, for being on the show. I really appreciate it, and have a good day.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.